When I think about our capacity to address big, important problems as a country, it seems to me valuable that there is real debate, that there is rollicking debate, that contrary points of view are heard, that there are people who do not all have the same perspective on something, who are working on big, complicated problems. Is there groupthink about the American economy? Are there a broad enough range of opinions and attitudes being considered when we debate what to do about the economy, or is it all people who worked for the same companies and went to the same schools and have the same take on things?
Well, I would say that there is a huge varieties of views. The question is not whether there are many different views, but whether some people are listened to or not. I mean, this financial crisis was caused by greed, excesses, arrogance, too much risk-taking, leverage on Wall Street. And now 2 years later, we've done too little too late with Dodd-Frank. The bonuses are back to what they were before. Nothing has changed on Wall Street. It's business as usual. So I feel like nothing has changed. So there are other views out there. I wrote a whole book about what you should do about changing the financial system. I think that those who have power and the system is captured by those who have power and money, that's how the system works, and I don't think much has changed so far.
So you think that the systemic problems, the structural problems that led us to the crisis in the first place, now this far out from it, aren't fixed? Those same problems still exist?
Yeah, they exist. You know, there is a system of compensation on Wall Street that leads people to take too much risk because, you privatize the gains in good times, you socialize the losses, and now, as we know, bonuses are back to what they were before. The system of compensation has not changed at all, right? That's an example of it. We talked about needing to control and regulate better derivatives, and we've done very little. I think we should have split banks between commercial banks and investment banks. I think that repealing the Glass-Steagall Act was a mistake. Even the Volcker Light rule has been just diluted to the extreme. So this reform goes a little bit in the right direction, but as I said, it's too little too late.
One of the things that you have argued is that it's a bad thing for America that some of our past economic growth was driven by too much of America's human capital going into the finance sector. Too many smart kids with very high-level education, high-level degrees, with good educations, too many of them all going into Wall Street. Why is that a problem?
Well, it's a problem when you have a society where you have more financial engineers than computer engineers. You know, in China and India, they're producing hundreds of thousands of them a year of true engineers, while in the US, we have very few of them. So we have invested our human capital into financial services. That is a lot about redistributing wealth and income rather than producing it. We're not producing as many goods and services. We've invested into housing stock, that is the least productive form of capital, instead of human capital producing goods and services. You know, it's nice to have big homes, but they don't increase the productivity of labor. So I think we have misallocated capital towards finance and financial services and towards housing, and not enough in producing real goods and services, increase welfare for all.
How do you undo that? How do you make a decision to reallocate capital in a way that's better for the country in the long run?
Well, in part, people are going to go where the money is. So if compensation on Wall Street is as outrageous as it is, people are going to keep on going there. I think we should stop subsidizing housing. There are too many tax incentives for housing. And we should invest in things that increase skills of the labor force, or invest into things that increase technology. There are tons of new sectors where they could be the sectors of the future. We have, the green energy stuff and the alternative energy. We have life sciences. We have IT services, we have nanotechnology, we have a whole range of new technologies out there, and the Chinese and some of them, or the Indians, are ahead of us because they subsidize those types of new activities and we don't.
When you talk about those kinds of investments in tech, in infrastructure, in what you were talking about earlier with efforts to try to prevent the creation of a class of structurally unemployed people who are unemployed in the long run. You talk about that kind of spending. I know you're also concerned about our fiscal health, about how much debt and how much debt we're willing to take on. So how how do you balance the need for spending like that to help the economy with worries about additional deficit spending?
Well, some of the proposals I made recently were to invest more in the things we need, like education, like infrastructure, like providing incentives to firms to hire workers, to a payroll tax. And the way to make sure it doesn't increase the deficit, to make it revenue neutral at least, would have been to let the tax cuts for the rich expire, increase the estate tax, increase dividends and capital gains tax, so at least it would have been revenue neutral. While we're not doing this extra spending, we're giving just a tax cut to everybody, and it's going to cost us another $1 trillion. So there are ways to make sure it doesn't bust the budget.
So essentially, you don't want to bust the budget if you don't have to, but if you're going to deficit spend, you better get some bang for the buck. And so deficit spending to give rich people money they're not going to spend is not only stupid, it's wrong.
Yeah, there is a study by the Congressional Budget Office that says that of all forms of essentially incentives, reducing the taxes for the rich has the least bang for the buck, and instead providing workers and firms an incentive to hire workers as the greatest incentive to increasing economic growth and hiring. So we're just doing the opposite.
It is, I'm no economist, as you can probably tell, but even I know that, and it is frustrating to me that decisions are being made for an economy as huge as ours, with something as important as major changes to the tax code, in a complete vacuum of basic economic argument like that. Do you feel like Congress is an economics-free zone, that they're making decisions without regard for the mathematical implications for what they're trying to fix?
Yes, I mean, there is no budget constraint because, you know, in Europe the bond vigilantes have woken up, but in the US you can still borrow as a government at less than 3%. So the path of least resistance is just to borrow and spend and reduce taxes and not face those kind of constraints. So we're doing just the wrong things until at some point the market is going to wake up. Like James Carville once said, you know, my next life I want to wake up as the bond market vigilante, because once they wake up, things can get really ugly, but we're not yet there.
If we are going to avoid another calamity, what has to happen politically? Do we need, I mean, the sort of things that you're describing don't seem outside the realm of political possibility, except they are. They don't, they're not, the reasonable proposal to make a deficit neutral investment that will have an immediate economic impact, and the way that you pay for it is by taking away stuff from rich people who are already doing well, which will have no economic impact. It seems very sane, and yet those things are beyond reach, even with large Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Does this mean that you think that there really isn't a political way out?
Realistically, yeah, I don't think there's any political way out for the next couple of years. You know, I mean, this was an election year. We haven't done anything. 2012 is a presidential election year. Nothing is done on the structural thing. Next year there is, this deficit commission is going to come up with its own proposals. But given how divided the two parties are, I don't think that any of those recommendations are going to be implemented. So we're going to have a $1 trillion deficit this year, next year, 2012, and even 13, because the budget for 13 is decided at the end of 12. So whoever is going to be president in 2013, if he or she has control of Congress, may start to do something about our long-run challenges. But I don't see how this Congress and the division and lack of bipartisanship in Congress today can lead us to do anything good for the next couple of years, realistically. I wish it was otherwise, but I don't think that realistically that's going to be the case.
Even if I accept that, isn't the choice between having a $1 trillion deficit and really high unemployment, or a $1 trillion deficit and some of it has been used to bring unemployment down because we're doing spending? I mean, if we're going to have debt and deficit problems anyway, couldn't we also do something to get economic growth moving and get people back working with the money that we're going to spend regardless?
Yes, I would have had less tax cuts, especially for the rich, and I would have invested more into infrastructures. Maybe we need an infrastructure bank, invest into skills and workers. in education. I mean, today it's a bit of a disaster in the United States. Last year there was a study by the Army that looked at ages between 17 and 24 and who qualifies to be drafted for the Army. And they found out that based on 4 criteria that are if you are either obese, or you're a drug addict, or you're a habitual criminal, or you don't have a high school degree or equivalent. Today, about 75% of all Americans in the ages 17 to 24 do not qualify for the Army, let alone for a civilian job. So that's the situation right now in the United States. It's all across. Is white, is minorities. We're around people probably, most people here have a college degree, masters, even PhDs, but out there's a whole society of people who don't get any skills and they cannot compete in this global economy. That's what America is all about these days. It's kind of scary.
Do you have faith that the administration right now, the Obama administration, has people who both analytically are capable of understanding what's wrong with the country and what's right to do, but also strategically capable of moving the country toward the positive ends?
There are plenty of smart people in the administration. There'll be some changes in the economic team, but I think that the constraint is going to be more the political constraint. To do anything, you need not even a majority, but you need at least 60 votes in the Senate. And right now the Democrats don't have it, and therefore everything is going to be stalled. Anything is important and difficult. I would say we'll have 2 years in which there will be a total gridlock and total stalemate on all the major decisions. As I said, people talk about these tax compromise, but there was no compromise. The Republican got the tax cuts for the rich and the tax cuts for the state tax. The Democrats got the reduction in the unemployment benefits and the cut in the payroll tax. But it was not compromised because we paid it through another $1 trillion deficit. So that was easy to do, right? There was zero sacrifice from either side. And once there'll be real sacrifice to be made, I don't think that anybody's going to make any sacrifice. We're going to kick the can down the road until something troubling is going to happen. I think that's at least the more likely scenario for the next couple of years. I don't see any other one.
Professor Rubini, if anybody ever tells you you haven't earned that whole Dr. Doom nickname thing, you pop
Dr. Realist.
You pop them in the teeth for me. You just tell them that I said that you earned it. You earned it right here at the 92nd Street Y, if nowhere else. Professor, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.